Moore gives a refreshing and inspiring interview this episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. She's one of the few recruiters at Barkley in Kansas City, and they are up to big things. Kate is in charge of finding and hiring talent across all disciplines in advertising and public relations, which seems difficult to me, but she's the pro. This episode is candid. We open up about the job search process, from applying to negotiating starting salaries. I was so amazed by the percent of people that negotiate for a higher salary. She even gives us practical advice on how to do it successfully. Kate Moore cares about her role at Barkley, and you can tell in this episode as we dive into their excellent work, culture, and even what it's like to be a recruiter, which seems difficult, but it seems to be super fulfilling as well. So to connect with Kate and to see her recommended resources just for you, head over to our Instagram at enteringad. Tell her Breaking and Entering sent you when connecting. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schallenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Kate Moore, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I've been so excited. I don't know if you can get this about recruiters, but we love talking. Obviously, our industry is super exciting, and talking about talent is, what revs us up. And so I'm super excited that you asked me to be here and pumped to chat a little bit more today.
Yes. It's going to be awesome. So you are a recruiter at Barkley, and do you specialize in creative, brand? What are you looking at for talent-wise?
Yeah, good question. So I don't know how familiar you are with Barkley, but we are a full service integrated team, probably pretty similar from a specialty perspective that you do see at a lot of shops. So what that means is that we're hiring across the board, right? We need strategists as much as we need creatives, as much as we need social, as much as we need finance. We need all of the parts together. And I really love the way that our recruiting team actually supports everything. So we don't have any specialties. Our recruiting team is our director of recruiting, myself and another senior recruiter, and then our coordinator, and that's it. So we're a lean and mean team, which means we kind of get support across the board. But I actually really love that. When I first kind of went into advertising, I think I had this mentality that I wanted to just be a creative recruiter, right? You see that title everywhere. I love working with creatives. I love looking at books, but there's kind of this cool power to get to be able to talk creative the same way that you can strategy, the same way that you can account. Makes my toes busy because we're constantly getting new stuff to work on. So I've recruited for all of it across the board, and then also support more programming work at Barkley. So for us, that's things like our internship. We have a great relationship with MAPE, which is the Multicultural Advertising Internship Program for the 4As. And then we have a lot of new stuff coming up this year too. We're creating kind of a DIY portfolio school for BIPOC talent. We're doing a fellowship for more senior talent. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm sure you stay busy. I mean, that was not a lot of recruiters that you named off. And that's a pretty large agency. How large is Barkley in Kansas City?
Yeah, so we are actually fun, misconception about Kansas City is that we're based in Missouri, not Kansas. But I forgive you for that because Taylor Swift made the same mistake when she was performing here. So it's fine. So we actually have 4 offices. Our headquarters is here in KC, where I'm calling in from. We have a smaller office in Denver, Colorado, an office in Pittsburgh that specializes a little bit more within digital marketing and development, and then a small group of folks up in New York that have some of our media leadership. So altogether, I think it's like 420 partners, which is awesome, like that really solid mid-size. And I love that size for us.
I like how you call it partners.
Yeah, well, that really comes from us being independent. I think
that was my next question. Nice.
Yeah, there you go. I can read your mind.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a huge part for us. I think from a work perspective, it means that we get to operate a lot more nimbly. We get to try new things a lot more. We get to bring the best idea for the client, but I really love what it means from a culture perspective. You know, we don't have a holding company that is directing where we go and what we do. We get to form a really close relationship with our leadership team. You know, I think in the last year, the pandemic really came to light because we were able to support ourselves and really have this tight-knit support to get through it. So yeah, everyone that owns Barkley works at Barkley. So we use partners instead of employees.
I love that. I love that. You guys are like super creative too. I know I've seen a lot of great work, but what is some work right now that you guys have done recently that you're really proud of?
Oh man, I love that question because so I've been at Barkley for almost 4 years and I have a recency bias. So
Sure,
I always
absolutely.
like I'll see something new and I'll be like, that's my favorite piece at Barkley. And then you give me 3 months and there's something else new. So
Mhm.
I think two of the most recent things that have really made me just excited for the work that's here. We did this really cool work with, and I'm going to forget her last name, but Emily, who is in Schitt's Creek. I'm going to
Mhm.
look up her name and remind you later. But we did this really cool piece for Delta Faucets, which is one of our clients.
Okay.
I remember when we won Delta, I was like, all right, Saints. Like, someone tell me why this is so exciting. Everyone was like, no, this is such a cool brand. They're very like forward thinking within the space.
Mhm.
It's a really cool community if you think about it, because it's a lot of DIYers and like home buyers and people
Sure.
super passionate about it. And we got to take advantage of something that was really missing in the last year, which was really these like showrooms and showcases that you would get to go to kind of see things like this. And we did this at home virtual one with
Nice.
this awesome celebrity influencers. So it was really just kind of pivoting the way that we think about what the space has been in the last year, which is really what's resonated with the work that I've liked in the last year in terms of thinking through how are we connecting with consumers differently? How are we understanding like the gravity of the pandemic and what our brands can do differently? I think my favorite piece from last year was, you know, definitely our United We Move Planet Fitness work. So Planet Fitness, one of our largest brands, obviously one of the most immediately impacted from a COVID perspective, right? Like
Yes.
0 to 100, gyms are closed across the country. It wasn't as easy as, you know, like a Dairy Queen, for example. You can still go through drive-through and get a
Mhm.
Blizzard. What was our gym client gonna do? And
Yeah. So what they do?
so we really got to pivot and think through, you know, how are we still going to connect with our fans and be champions of fitness? And so we created these at-home work-ins.
Nice.
And so it was more of this concept of bringing the fitness to people, and they were so fun, which I think is just a large vibe of Planet Fitness, right? They're not trying to be the scary Orange Theories of the world. They're
Mhm.
trying to really make fitness for everyone. So it was these Facebook Live sessions that were led by Planet Fitness trainers and by celebrities. There was one that was led by dogs. There was
Mhm.
all of this content that we produced for the app. And what I think what was so cool about it was that like it didn't exist for that brand. And so there was
Mhm.
so much production and so much creative that had to just come out essentially overnight. And to see the work that our teams put into that, into the really beginning times of the pandemic, where there was kind of this uncertainty about the industry and
Mhm.
truly about the world, right?
Right.
So to see our teams like still put in the work and just
Right.
make really great creative was super inspiring.
There
So
you go.
love
Awesome.
that work.
Yeah. That seems really interesting. And uh, I've always been an LA Fitness guy, as you can tell by the shirt I'm wearing. But now I'll have to check out the Planet Fitness. I
There
like
you
that.
go. There you go.
Awesome. So what are we going to talk about this episode? I think I want to dive into now how you broke into advertising. The name of our podcast is Breaking and Entering. So how you broke
Yeah.
into creative recruiting or just in recruiting and advertising, and then let's talk about the meat of the episode. Probably is how do we get people into advertising? How do we help them break in? So let's start off with your
Yeah.
story first. How did you get where you're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because it has some twists and turns. So,
Mhm.
um, I actually, when I was, oh, maybe a sophomore or a junior in high school, was a part of this really large, like experiential PR campaign for a certain client. It would take me a long time to get into the specifics of it. But long story short, I kind of got to see what advertising and PR looked like. And I was 16 and I was so impressionable. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I remember speaking to someone who was an assistant account executive at the time, like the most junior person on the campaign. And she was like, you need to go to school for advertising. That's how I got here. Here's what you need to do. And this random woman told me, you need to go to the University of Missouri. They have the best journalism school in the country. And so again,
they are good. They are good.
16-year-old me was like, all right, mom and dad, here's what I'm doing, I'm going to Mizzou.
That's great.
It was 4 hours for me. It wasn't like a crazy thing to convince my parents on, but I was one of those people that went to school, knew what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to go into account, within creative or within advertising.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you all the time in, summer orientation that, the average person like changes their major 3 times. And I was like, wow, must suck to be those people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've got it all figured out. And I think I made it through 2 years of grad school. And my junior year, I was taking an HR class as like a business elective, totally randomly, and came across the process of recruiting. And for me, it was a light bulb moment, because it was this same concept of what drew me to account management, about building relationships, spotting opportunities, being that support line, being an advocate for like 2 groups of people. And I was like, this is it. I want to be in recruiting, but I love what I've learned so far about advertising. I want to be a recruiter in an advertising agency. And again, naive senior college Kate, like, just assumed that was going to work out, and you just decide what you're going to do and you do it. It's a very niche field. I mentioned like our team is only 4 people. I know there's larger and smaller recruiting teams at agencies, but it's not obviously the size of the creative or the brand or the strategy teams. So
no,
the opportunity wasn't really there when I graduated, and it was still important that I got a job and paid the bills. I paid for myself to go to college, so I didn't really have the luxury of sitting around to see what happened. So I worked in really corporate HR when I first graduated. And
how was that?
It was a learning experience,
Yep.
You really do. I think there's certain opportunities that you get thrown in, and getting thrown in is great because you get to swim as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And there was so much basis and generalist work about HR that I got to learn. But at the end of it, one, I had to like fire people, which if you just from this 10 minutes of talking with me can imagine, I'm really poor at. I was the positive side of HR. But I remember at my last job before Barkley, I had a lot of different ideas on how we should staff differently and look at our talent model differently and attract people to our employer. And it was always met with this, well, corporate says this is what we have to do. Like, this is our structure of how we do things. We can't really try things new here. Sorry. And that was such a dissonance in my brain growing up and learning into advertising, because I wanted to be this idea person. And I was like, well, there's ideas here. There is creativity here. I know it's not, copyright in our direction, but you can find creative opportunities in every avenue. And I was really met with that tension that I wasn't able to have that there. And so I kind of like had this internal decision that I was done with it, and I wanted to go and really chase what I wanted when I graduated, which I give this advice to people all the time. I reached out to the agencies that I admired in the area, again, none of which were hiring recruiters. It was not a very common thing to hire. Reached out to everyone and said, it wasn't a blanket email. It was specifics about what stood out to me about that company. I know that you're not hiring for any recruiting roles right now, but this is really where I see myself learning. If you're open to an informational interview or a job shadow or just connecting, I'd love to do that. And then maybe a month later, I got a job at Barkley. And I don't think it was because of that. I don't think the only way you get a job is by, networking. I think it's an incredibly important part of the process, but it's a cherry on top to be able to get to talk to someone and get to experience a little bit more about, if you do have this ideal of what your dream job is, getting to confirm that and getting to shadow and getting to have an informational interview. And I started at Barkley almost 4 years ago, and have grown so much in my time here, have learned so much more about the industry. I think one of my favorite challenges is when I get to recruit for something that feels like out of my wheelhouse. Data analytics, development, it's not something that my brain necessarily makes sense of. And so to get that challenge of really understanding the meat of the role, how I can be a partner to the hiring team, that's such a cool challenge for me. And then, just thinking through how our talent market has evolved too. Our roles are not as simple as we have a job and we fill it. I would say that's 50 to 70% of my role. And there's so much more as we think about just talent as a larger strategy. So that's my story and how I ended up where I'm at. And it's been awesome. I feel like 3.5, 4 years is a kind of like senior tenure in our industry.
Sure, yeah.
But I love it because, so much has changed. Barkley has grown so much. Like, this is a different Barkley in really good ways from when I started. And that's what's kept me really excited, is that, we're not unwilling to change and to evolve and to adapt and to grow. So I get to grow with the company, which has been awesome.
I love it. When you when you reached out, hold on, train's coming. Chicago trains. When you reached out on LinkedIn, what was your message, and how many people did you reach out to, and how many people did you hear from?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably find the first email that I reached out to you, which is hilarious. I'm like really toxic. I don't delete or organize my emails. They're just unread or they're read, and it makes sense in my brain. There's other people that are like, the F is wrong with you. But yeah, I think it was kind of that formula that I mentioned earlier, really in terms of specifics of what stood out to a company for me. And that's something that I give, and we can kind of talk about the interview process here too, but that's one of my biggest tips I give junior talent is, we can see through if things are blanket messages.
Oh yeah.
If they're sent through to every person.
You send the wrong name too. I've done that.
It's happened to me many times.
That's
I've had
awesome.
a cover letter addressed to the wrong company.
Copy and paste.
Yeah. It's worth the pre-work, not only for us, for you to be able to articulate why you're excited about a certain opportunity, but it's worth the pre-work for you.
Absolutely.
Being able to really understand what you're interviewing for, and to get excited about it, and to do that due diligence for yourself, because I think we always forget it's a two-way street. So that's what I did. I didn't reach out to every single possible agency because, again, that blanket methodology didn't work out for me.
No.
I was in a good position. I was employed, right? I wasn't, and I'll check some of my privilege there, that I was getting paid. So I didn't need to find something to stay. But it allowed me to be a lot more conscious with my search and kind of narrow it down to 3 or 4 companies that I was really company crushing on at the time, if you will.
Sure.
And I think even the companies that, again, didn't have opens or opportunities at the time, were always open to connecting. We're always open to hopping on the phone and talking a little bit more about what their teams looked like. So that's something that I always encourage folks to. I think we forget how much people want to help each other in this industry.
Yep.
It's this podcast is such a great example of that. You will be surprised the amount of times people will put in the work to share information and resources with you and hop on the phone with you, get a virtual coffee with you. It can go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. People are really helpful if they have the time. Sometimes people are busy. So that's mended by a follow-up, which is crazy to some people, maybe 2 follow-ups. But it's definitely worth it when you put that work in, rather than, you can spend the same amount of time doing those blanket emails, do a long email list of different agencies, and that's still a lot of time you're spending. So it's better to pick 3 or 4 agencies that you really want to work for and put in that same amount of time and just work harder and reach out, customize it, make it real.
Right.
Send those out.
Something that I've seen recently that I really love is folks not even directly reaching out to me, but they'll reach out to, they'll use their networks, right? They'll reach out to a strategist that's in the position that they want.
Of course.
They'll reach out to someone who graduated from the university 2 years before they did, and have informational conversations that way. So by the time they reach out to me, they might say, hi, Kate, I've been a huge fan of Barkley's work because of XYZ. I actually reached out to Gino and we had a great conversation about XYZ, would love to stay connected about this opportunity, this job you have posted on your website, all of that stuff. I know it is kind of this different mentality of thinking through more agencies, less work, or less agencies, more work.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that's better for you because you end up in a position where you're more connected with the work and the purpose and the mission and the values of wherever you're reaching out to.
That's great advice there. Wow. So what are some of the things that really impressed you when you're interviewing people? Like, what can we take away from this podcast to really better our chances of probably getting that first interview? It's getting there. It's the hardest part. What I always was in the mentality, just get the first interview, get the first call, and then my confidence should be able to take me farther. But it was always getting there. Getting there was the hardest part. So how do you get to that first interview or that first phone screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you're right. I think that is such an important part of it, especially if you are in the recent grad or the internship phase where it feels like all you're doing is waiting for that first interview. It can get draining, and it's not the best for your mental health if you're sitting there and waiting for something to manifest. So
it's hurry up and wait.
I totally get that, when that's magnified in an example like that, it is a stressful process. I think ways to stand out and kind of get in that first step, I almost even hesitate to use the word stand out, because what I don't want to imply is that people get jobs based on who they know. People get jobs based on how funny they are. There's so much about you and your story that I want to encourage you to show. So something that, we always tell junior talent is you can show your work even if you're not a creative. And I think that is sometimes shared in schools that have a really robust mini agency structure, right? Where you have projects where there's an account person, a strategist, a copywriter, art director, and they kind of work together on a project. Let's acknowledge that not every school has that structure, right? And so if you are wanting to become a strategist, wanting to go into account management, you don't have a campaign or an idea that you can show, what can you add to your resume? It's things like writing samples, it's things like side projects that you have. Maybe there is a group project that showed that you were really good at research, or that you worked on your public communication skills. Show that off. I think every applicant tracking system allows you to attach things to your resume, so that's a good way to kind of add on. I think there's a lot.
I like that.
Yeah, it's just one other step you can do. I think cover letters are super controversial in our industry.
Ooh, what's your take on them?
So here's my take. Again, I don't think a person should ever get a job based on a piece of paper.
I like that.
I think it's an outdated concept that we expect this, or that you're taught in school, you're not going to get a job if you don't get a cover letter.
Sure.
What I do think cover letters are really great for are just an avenue to tell your story. If you're a creative and you have a portfolio, your About Me page might kind of target some of that.
Yeah.
But let's say that you are an accounting major who has this really creative side and is applying for an internship that maybe your resume doesn't tell the full story of what you're interested in and why. Use the cover letter for that.
Nice.
Right?
Yep.
Maybe there's a very, we just hired this really great new associate media buyer on our team. So just graduated May 2021. And one of the first things that she talked about, was either in her cover letter, it might have been in our first interview, but I think it was on her cover letter, was her meet cute with Barkley, which was so funny. She isn't from Kansas City, was visiting here and saw the big rocket on top of our building and asked our Uber driver what that was. And he said, oh, it's one of the big agencies here. And she went back to school and was like, that's a place I want to continue researching. It just stood out in my brain, and then was able to keep up with our work from her sophomore year to senior year. And so to kind of have that avenue to tell some of those stories is a great thing. Cover letters are just a huge waste of your time if it's that formulaic thing that our 6-year-old professors taught us of knowing regurgitating your bullet points on your resume and like using that language that is so not you. So I always encourage, in order to get to that first interview, take advantage of being able to tell your story. And again, I think networking is important, and I want to caveat it as more of a networking for you. You hopefully shouldn't only get a job based on who you know. I think our industry can get really guarded and homogenous when we treat it that way.
Yep.
And I think we all have a larger call to action to not do that. I actively don't do that as a recruiter. But I do think, again, reaching out to people that have the dream job you want, getting to understand more of, let's talk about Barkley specifically, right? If you're reaching out to a strategist at Barkley and getting to know more about Barkley's thinking on whole brands and our red thread, which is our concept of kind of this large idea that's running through brands, it's just going to help you feel more confident in interviews. It's going to help you like be able to articulate that better in your application, things like that. So that's something I think that's really helpful too. And then again, I think I kind of hammered this point in, and maybe this isn't something that necessarily helps you get a screen, but I do think it's going to help you apply to the right places, is really the pre-work that you have to do. And I don't mean that to take some of the work off our plate, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done on your side before you apply for a job, and before you apply for a job well, and before you nail that first phone interview.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's not going to go well.
What's the checklist then? What do we need to know?
So for me, I think it's a couple things. I think, one, it's researching the company, the work, the values, the people that are in the roles in the team that you might be looking for. One of my favorite things is when I'm talking to someone and they have sharp questions based on things they saw, or values that they are connected to about a certain company. If you go into an application blind, if you go into a phone screen blind, you're not doing yourself the duty of applying to the right places. So one, do your research. Two, I think practice is so important. And I don't only mean like practice in terms of interviewing practice. That's obviously huge. I'm sure every recruiter will tell you that.
Yeah.
Google situational based interview questions, interview with your friends, all that good stuff. But really being able to articulate quickly and efficiently your background, your strengths, your unique passions, and really what you're looking for. I think I think that Gen Z is very different in this way. But when I graduated, it was still very much the mentality of you graduate and like you'll be lucky to get a job. And like if you take the job you get, right? Like you are vying for the company's attention. And I like that balance has shifted a little bit. So I want you to tell me, even as a junior, even if I'm talking to you March of your senior year, tell me what you want. Tell me what's important to you in terms of the team balance that you want to work in, the type of work that you want to be doing. And don't let the first time you think of that be when a recruiter asks you. So do pre-work internally on yourself to know what you really want. And also, this is a logistic one, but I think it happens so often with junior talent. Know your requirements on location, on timing, on salary. It's frustrating as a recruiter to ask that in a first interview and to get a response of, oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Oh.
Okay, well, you
gotten that?
You should. Oh, all the time. All of the time.
Wait, what are the questions again?
I think just the logistic aspects, right?
Oh, okay.
So I think of timing and salary and location as some
those
of the
are like the easiest ones. I feel like you should know those.
That's great. I'm glad that you think that, because I don't run into that often with junior talent. I think it kind of seems like this scary real thing after internships and after school. So.
Oh wait, what about salary question? Like, for what's too high, what's too low, or how do you pick that number? That's scary to me. It's like, well, I want $100,000. Like, I'm not going to get that, but I want that.
I think we all do. So I think there's a lot of really great resources out there. First, do your research. One, check with your school. Some schools have like alumni networks that share salaries. Some schools provide, check that it's not, something from 2002, right?
Mhm.
But some schools provide like salary bands. Glassdoor is an okay place to start, but it's such a varied number and it's a self-selected number, so it isn't always the most accurate.
I don't really like Glassdoor at all.
Yeah, I have opinions on it as a
Okay.
recruiter.
Yeah.
And then you'll always see, like, if you stay up to date in things like Adweek, things like We Are Next, which is a resource specifically targeted towards junior talent, they'll post things like, there's an anonymous Google sheet going around where advertising professionals are submitting their salaries, or, here's where your ranges are, things like that. So do your research. And I always suggest to be transparent and to be honest. So if you have a range, let's say you graduate and you're targeting 45 to 55,000 for an assistant account executive role. Cool, great. If during the interview process your expectations change, or you want to negotiate for a higher number, or you think that you're worth a higher number, that's what recruiters are there for. We prefer the transparent conversations. I think we'd rather be what you might think is awkward in terms of having those tough conversations. Like, we do it every day.
Yeah.
And so be sure to be transparent with your recruiter on all of those pieces there, because the worst thing is, like, if you were to get to the full interview process and you get an offer and it feels like one of those things, timing, salary, location, like, doesn't match up with what you expected. And sometimes it's hard on a recruiter perspective to be like, I met them exactly like all of the things that they said at the beginning, like what happened, what changed. So I think that sense of, continued transparency is really important too.
Have you had anybody negotiate the salary?
Yeah, all the time. Almost probably every offer I've ever given out.
Really?
Yeah, I would say probably upwards of 75%.
So you'll give them an offer and they'll be like, oh, I want more.
Well, I think they say it a little more gracefully.
Right, of course.
And it's not always met either. I think that's something that I was never taught about negotiation when I was in college, is like, it's not an automatic thing. There's a process. And so I think when it comes to negotiation, honestly, maybe this is a hot take, but like, if you think that you have a reason for it, I always encourage everyone to.
I love that. That's not a hot take.
What I think is really stressful, and again, like, this might sound wild to you, but these are real conversations I've had, is, if I have a conversation with someone who says, oh, well, like, my rent in my building is going up, so I'd like an extra 5K. And it's like, that isn't what company salary bands are created around. They're created around a specific set of measurable skills, and there's internal equity. And so you have to be prepared to come to the table with, are you bringing a master's degree? Is there, specific awards that you're bringing to the table, or you've gotten to work on real clients in school, or you had an extra internship? Like, be prepared to articulate what that is that you think that you deserve more. And be prepared that it might not work out. And I think something that I also did not value enough when I was in school is kind of understanding total comp. And when I say total comp, what an offer will look like when you get it. I remember, to this day, like, the first job offer I got, I like didn't even look at it. I like sent it to my dad. I was like, you tell me if this is good. Like, I don't understand any of these numbers. Please help. And that's okay. I talk to junior talent all the time that's like, I need the weekend. I want to talk to my parents. I'm like, that's great. Like, go ahead, bring in your resources, because this is very new to you. But when you're getting an offer, it's going to include, yes, the salary, but there's other things in there, right? There's benefits and insurance, 401k and PTO and other perks that you're going to see. You might see relocation assistance if you're moving. You might see a signing bonus. And so really being able to think through, okay, well, how do all these things add together? What is my potential for growth here? Do I know that this company does annual reviews? Is there the chance for my salary to be reviewed after 6 months or after a year? Those are really important things to take into consideration outside of just that dollar amount. Because if you think about it, if you're working part-time roles in college, you likely haven't interacted with those things that much before.
No.
It's just like, here's how much you're making. Great. Like, perks and benefits were not a thing for me until I got my first full-time role. So
Yeah, you can negotiate those too, right? Like the
yeah,
benefits and maybe the 401k matching, if that's a thing. Um, all those are negotiable, like more PTO.
yeah, I always think about it. And when I give an offer, the language I always use is think about these different parts as levers.
Yep.
And so for me, like if there's a signing bonus in the offer, if there's a relocation assistance offer, if there's a salary in the offer and you ask for something, well, maybe we can't move up on the salary, but here's an extra, amount on your sign bonus, or here's an extra amount on your reload. So there is that concept of negotiation when it does come to that total comp too. You're right.
If you're telling me there's signing bonuses at Barkley, we'll be in touch. That's awesome.
Is that not a thing?
I've never heard of a signing bonus in advertising.
Wow. Well, dang, I feel cool now. I think there's also like, there's kind of this different talent landscape right now. Like agencies have to be more competitive than ever because of the pandemic, because you're seeing people that are totally leaving the industry. You're seeing people that are like the opportunities for creatives and idea people outside of our industry is higher now than it ever has been. Yeah. Whether it's freelance work, whether it's client side work, like there's people that just spend time with their families and want to like work at their family's farmer's market stand and leave a senior level role in an agency. Like that's the thing I've seen happen. And so, there is really this different sense of being competitive. And I think that's kind of a cool power for talent though. It is a talent driven market right now, and maybe I'm giving too much power to talent as a recruiter, but I do think it's cool that like, again, there is this, it's dating almost, right? Like it's no longer just companies deciding who is their best and we're bringing them on. It's a two-way courtship. And so it's just as important for the company that you're interviewing with to impress you and to sell you on the process. That's something that we train all of our partners on, is no matter what part of the interview process you are, no matter if this person came to Barkley and actively applied, or if we reached out to them, like your job in every interview is to sell Barkley. And, I think that that's a little bit of a different way to think about the interview process than it was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Even again, when I graduated, I didn't necessarily feel like that was huge. So I think that balance has been a really good change.
This is a really healthy, transparent conversation. And I appreciate that.
That's my favorite thing. I think, I don't know if it's all recruiters. I know I definitely feel this way about my team, but like you need to be transparent because jobs are a thing and finding jobs is a process. And I think especially with junior talent, and that's one of the reasons that I love working with junior talent so much, is there's also this sense of like guide you get to play almost. Like my favorite thing is, I'll tell kind of two stories here. Like I love talking to people where I'm like, I don't necessarily think that this might be the right path for you, but I love this about your background. Have you thought about this? Like, would you be interested in talking with someone on this team and really helping provide, like, I wouldn't even call it like positive feedback, but again, kind of just being that ally for someone's talent journey. That's what excites me about my job. And then getting to have that same conversation with candidates too. We had a gal that we offered a social media internship to her senior year.
Nice.
She declined it. She called us back 2 months later. She was like, Kate, haven't been able to stop thinking about Barkley. And I think I realized the reason I declined. The role that I'm doing right now in my like student agency is this like content strategist, like social strategist role. But what I'm geeking out about, what I'm loving about is the research and like building together a consumer journey and understanding the why of where we're putting our social. And I think I want to be in strategy. I know it's probably too late, but could I apply for the strategy internship? And I was like, you know what? Sure, let's do it. Nice. And she did, and she got the internship, and now she's like one of the most loved strategists at Barkley. She's been here 2 years since her internship. And so I love being able to help, like the same way that Barkley helps spot opportunities for our clients, I like to do that with talent too. So that's kind of a cool part of the transparency that recruiters have, is they want to help you out. I promise.
Yeah. Was there another story you said too, or?
Oh, I think no, just like 2 points, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Story.
Nice. Well, this has been really helpful. Is there anything you've been itching that you wanted to mention that you maybe thought about earlier today that we haven't covered?
Yeah, something I've been thinking about recently, you asked me a really great question before we hopped on the podcast to, share some resources that I love with junior talent.
Yep.
And one of the things, and maybe this was the case when I graduated, but I feel like it isn't, is that there are so many resources now. And I think especially after the last year, I think there's been this shift where, you know, we're no longer trying to treat this industry as like this guarded, again, kind of like Mad Men, like you have to know someone to get in type of thing, and really share our ideas. And that's been this really cool shift. And I think a large portion of the group that's driving that is Gen Z and like young professionals and recent grads. I think there's kind of this natural altruism within this group that like you want to help each other out and you want to see each other succeed. So take advantage of that. When you're on the first side of trying to find a job, again, reach out to your peers, network, connect, like even within your friend group, support each other on the journey to get jobs. But then once you're on the other side, don't forget to pay it back. Share your knowledge and resources, be a mentor, connect with your alma mater. There's a really, really great program I love through We Are Next that I mentioned earlier called Coffee at a Distance, which is, any industry professional can sign up and junior can reach out to them and book 20 minutes on their calendar. Like, do that as a junior. You don't need to be a director to do that. You already have knowledge right away in your career. And so I think being able to like remember the paths and the things that you're learning on this podcast right now in terms of ways to break in the industry, make sure to help other people do that, because something that we need is more people breaking into our industry. If we get the same group of talent pools from the same schools that think the same and create the same, and quite honestly, a lot of the times look the same, we are not going to be creating things differently and changing the inclusive nature that we need to in our industry. So we need to make our industry a lot more welcoming, a lot more inviting, and something that's easier to get into, that you don't have to go to a very specific school, don't have to go to portfolio school to become creative, you don't have to have an internship in a top agency to get a job. Like, I want to live in a world where all of those don't exist anymore. And I think part of that is what we can do by providing back to our network. So I guess that's just more of my call to action, if you will.
I love that. That's a soundbite for the episode for sure. Love it. Great. All right, then are you hiring right now? Can people reach out to you? What's the situation there?
Oh my God, yes. Even if I wasn't hiring right now, I want people to reach out to me. Again, I love talking to people. In emails and LinkedIn messages that I get of folks just wanting to reach out and get to know more about Barkley and get to talk to people is one of my favorite things. So please connect with me. I'm Kate Moore on LinkedIn. I'll give you, you have my email.
That will be taken care of.
You'll put it in there. We're kind of hiring across the board right now. I think from like a junior perspective, we're hiring some folks in our account team. I'm hiring a writer in our Colorado office. We're hiring some folks in our social media team. We're hiring an associate resource manager, which is such a fun role. It's like a project management, but like solely within the team, understanding like staffing and freelancing and cool stuff like that. So wow. I know. And the new business pipeline is healthy and moving. So I'm sure I'll have a new answer for you in 2 weeks.
This will probably be posted in a couple of weeks. So
there we go. Things will probably be even more different, but definitely reach out. Again, would love to connect and chat about Barkley. So would just be a recruiting ally and partner for folks too.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Please reach out. You've been fantastic. This has been a really splendid episode. So thank you again.
You're fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's guest. Make sure you go and connect with them on LinkedIn. Tell them that Breaking and Entering sent you. Now, thank you to Mikey Malarkey, our audio technician, and Buchun Zhang, our creative director, as well as the student team from the Midnight Oil Agency at the University of Illinois. Can't do it without you all. Thank you very much. We will see you all next week with another amazing guest.